Hi, how are you?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, hold on, let me a second. Let me make you bigger. There we go. Yay! I'm
I
excited.
am too. I am too.
Awesome. All right, well, we will go ahead and get started. I'd like to welcome everybody to our latest edition of Bring a Hacker to Work Day, where we talk with people who are in the industry that are in various areas of cybersecurity and hacking, and what it is that they do, how do they get there, things of that nature. Our guest today is officially Dr. Tessa Cole. Tessa, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I just graduated or got my passed my final defense from Georgia State University in their criminology and criminal justice program. My focus is on cybercrime. For my dissertation, I focused on offenders' decision-making processes, but I really enjoy researching the victim aspect online when it comes to like cyber victimization. I am originally a Tennessee native. Go Big Orange. And I have a daughter and a husband. And I come from a very large family. I'm one of 28 siblings. So yeah, my parents had two by birth, and then they adopted the rest of us. So yeah. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Absolutely amazing. So what did you go to school for?
So I started off when I graduated high school, I thought I wanted to be an attorney. No diss to my husband because he's almost finished with law school, but I realized in undergrad that was not for me. I received my bachelor's of science in political science. And then I had a really influential mentor at Berry College who was like, you ought to go into research because you're always asking why. And so he encouraged me to apply for a couple different programs, and the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga was one of them in their criminal justice department, because I've always been very geared towards right is right and wrong is wrong. And so I got accepted into UTC's program. And originally I thought I wanted to focus on inmate mental health. I worked as a correctional officer for a little bit because I'm one of the people that believe if you want to change things, you also need to be on the ground to be able to understand like what exactly you're working with and like the demographics of the individuals that you're serving. So as a correctional officer, I quickly realized that that was not for me. And on one of my random days off from not going to school and working, I watched this documentary called I Am Jane Doe, and I fell in love with cybercrime. Sorry, my husband is.
No worries.
We live in a small, tight area, but I fell in love with cybercrime, cyber victimization, and so it completely changed the trajectory of my research focus. I went from, like I said, mental health focus with criminology into the cyber laws, how that affects victims, and on down to like the statutes with like Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act. Which is another fun fact. My husband and I have a journal article that has been accepted for publication that's being reviewed right now. So he did the legal aspect and I was more of the researcher, but we went through and looked at the state statutes, which was like a extension of my thesis from my master's, but I wanted to see what states actually use those statutes. So yeah, it's great if you have cybercrime laws in place, but is anyone using them? And if they're not, then we're not really helping victims, right? And I've done similar analyses too, looking at like Georgia's state statutes when it comes to cyber bullying. And you can have a state statute like Georgia has with cyberbullying, but it's never been used. Yeah, so that's how I ended up focused on cyber crime, cyber
Mhm.
victimization. And then more recently, with COVID, and how everyone's interacting more online, I when I started my PhD, I was like, I would really like to have some fun money, so my husband and I can go on dates. And so I started applying for like babysitting jobs online. And one of the first opportunities I had was a scam. And so then I sort of got angry and I was like, all right, let's go. And that's when I got into like the offenders' decision-making processes when it comes to who do they target, how do they target, what are the linguistics that they use, to target people, in addition to like the tactics. Are we just looking at like phishing scams, Bitcoin? So yeah, that's the sorry, sort of a long story of how I got into cyber, but yeah, that's why I'm here.
Awesome. So when you're taking a look at the reasons for why some of these fraudsters do what they do you have like a target victim group that you work with? Like, are you focused on specifically kids, or specifically I think I saw some of your research for job seekers, or what does that look like?
So, because I was irritated with fraudsters when it came to employment, at the beginning of my PhD, I started off with focusing on like job seekers and how they may be victimized by offenders. But I, my research is really broad when it comes to victimization online. So I for my master's, I looked at revenge porn or non-consensual porn distribution. Um, and so it sort of varies on what the like where what is currently happening. Like, if you during COVID, we saw a lot of like scams with like the refunds, or not the refunds, but
The
uh,
PPPs.
yes. So I was able to find with my dissertation a lot of groups, forums online where these individuals were either teaching each other hacking, selling the products they had stolen from non-offending victims, or also defrauding each other. And so my dissertation really focused on how offenders defraud each other. Because if you think about it, if we're going to study the best of the best, shouldn't we be studying those who are involved in criminality with each other? So yeah, it ebbs and flows, but for the most part, it's focused on how the internet, or how offenders are using the different capabilities of the internet to victimize their targets, whether that be other offenders or non-offending victims, like hopefully you and I and all of us on this call are not offending. So, and it's always hope to always change, right? So
So what did your research say? I think all of us either now or at some point in the, recent history or future are going to be looking for jobs, right? When it comes to our job search, what do we need to be on the lookout? Like, what did your research, I guess, point towards as far as like people who are looking for jobs in the cyberspace?
yeah, so I analyzed offenders, like unique offenders, and then I also analyzed like fraud instances, because you could have like multiple different instances, but it'd be the same fraudster, right? And so I wanted to make sure that I was picking up that it wasn't just like I'm saying, oh, this one fraudster is, because this one fraudster behaves this way, every single fraudster behaves that way, which isn't true. We know that. Like, because of that, when I was looking at the research, what appears the most to me, and I know it is a smaller sample size, but I am one person and one person, it's very difficult to pretend to be multiple different people. And I was pretending to be 8 people for a period of 12 weeks. So yeah, to try to keep up with that and texting friends and stuff was overwhelming. But cues of politeness when you're corresponding with an employer were that was statistically significant when a fraudster or fraud instance was being deployed against me / my fake profiles. In addition to that, fraudsters used it was statistically significant for them to use phishing and smishing attacks. And then they were really, really big into personal information. So whether that be social security number, and even sometimes like asking for pictures of driver's license, anything that they can get their hands on, because most of them are pretty prolific in their scams. And so they can't cash out all the money that they defraud from people. So they have to use other individuals' credentials to do so. And so I would encourage you not to and I find myself too oftentimes being like, hey, click, let's, apply for this job, apply for that one. But you have to be very careful not to give too much information away about yourself before you've even had, a face-to-face conversation with the potential employer. So stay away from personal information, sharing that, because oftentimes that's one of the first things they're going to ask for. And then cues of urgency. I found it kind of interesting because cues of urgency were not statistically significant in my study when it came to like all around the fraud instances. And I would like to do more research into why that is, because typically, you receive a phishing email and it's like, oh, you have 2 hours to claim your prize. But perhaps, and this is just me like guessing, okay, more research needs to be done into this, but perhaps offenders know that job seekers aren't going to just jump at the first opportunity because they're applying for multiple, right? Mm-hmm. So you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket, because we all know is when we go to, pursue a job, just because we make it onto the next round doesn't mean that job is going to be offered to us. So that could be one of the reasons why cues of urgency weren't significant. But yeah, just the way that the individual communicates with you, I would say that grammar errors would be significant, but they really aren't. And I think that goes back to like our humanistic side. The best fraudster could communicate with the best grammar ever, right? And I'll say I am not, even though I am a researcher and I just, defended my dissertation, grammar is something that I've always struggled with my whole entire life. And so just because there's a job posting that doesn't appear sophisticated in language, that doesn't mean that that's fraudulent or vice versa. So yeah.
So when we're taught about social engineering, and we're taught to, be on the lookout for things like, phishing or, smishing type attacks, right? One of the first things we're told to look at is the grammar, right? To look at things like the punctuation. But it sounds like what you're saying is that, when these folks would put up, for example, job placement ads that said, hey, this I'm hiring for this fake job, it didn't necessarily, raise any flags just from a linguistic perspective. Like it didn't, nothing popped out like in Grammarly that says, hey, this is obviously, not a real job ad. This is, a fake one.
Right. No, and that is, and I manually went through and coded for that. And then I also used like in vivo to pick up to see if there was any type of anything I was missing. And I will say for one of my dissertation chapters, I completed a scoping review looking at all prior research and how those researchers looked at linguistic cues, grammar, and everything came back the same. As it doesn't matter how horrible the grammar was. It mattered how well the offender was able to socially engineer their target into buying into their scam. So yeah, you're exactly right.
So what are these where are these, I guess, fraudulent like job ads, where are they located at? Like, I mean, are they on like Indeed or like your Monsters or your like Glass Doors, or, are they on like, more, I guess, shadier types of sites, like home work from home, .org or something. I made that up in case that's a real thing. So like, I'm not coming for anybody, but.
Well, I conducted my study on Monster and Indeed, and that's where all of the fraudulent ads that were presented to my personas were found. But I did, as time goes on and more databases are created for jobs. I know that there's like a new one. I want to not, I would say hookups, but I know it's not hookups. It's Handshake, like for like college kids. So I think that offenders are going to just keep up with the times, right? So like if you go online, you can find websites where you can buy, and this is on the clear web, websites where you can buy student emails, right? So if you can buy a student email, do you not think that you can create an account on Handshake and target other students? So I mean, I don't think that offenders are going to stop pursuing employment scams, nor do I think that they're going to stop, pursuing romance scams, but their tactics are going to change. So maybe it's not phishing a year from now that becomes a bigger issue. Maybe it's sextortion scams, right? But it is all using technology to meet your end, which is financial monetary gain.
Mm-hmm. So is the takeaway from that we shouldn't trust jobs that are on Monster and or the places that you took a look at, or what should be our, I guess, our takeaway from what you've seen for people who are trying to take advantage of people who are applying for jobs, right? Because if we think about what we would typically do, we would go to Monster, we'd see a job that we think looks good, we'd apply. They're saying, hey, put your email address in here and put your resume in here, right? Which are fair games. But they might go further during the application process and say, hey, give me your social security number, or, I need to make sure it's you. So could you send me a copy of your driver's license? What should we expect during the application process, and what should raise, I guess, kind of some red flags for us?
So what I also did in this study is every single job that I applied for with the fake persona, I would look them up on BBB, to the Better Bureau, also check out all their social media. I would go to their websites. So it's doing your due diligence, and I'm not victim blaming at all here, but doing your due diligence to see, like, is this organization, company, legitimate based off of other people, like what other people are saying about them? How long have they been in business? And a lot of times you have to, like, I always think of, liquor license, right? So you have to like apply for a liquor license. Can you find the license if you're an accountant for the company that's offering these, this job on Indeed? So I don't think it's, I think this is a twofold. I think it's checking to make sure that the company that you are applying for is legitimate, which means that you can't just go through and click a bunch of jobs. And I would also warn against just uploading your application, because recently I've discovered, and this is exactly what I did in order to create my fake personas online, was I went to see other applicants that are applying for, say, like a nannying job, right? Because you can search, like what all these other applicants applying for nannying jobs and see their resumes and build a resume based off of that. And so that may be another way too, that offenders are socially engineering you. So if they know that you worked for a family for 10 years, they might come in and like socially engineer the way they speak to you about, oh, we value family, we want you to be a part of it, we'll have trips that we go on to get you to believe them, or like appeal to like that part of your characteristic, so there's that. And then the other aspect, and I always go after the bigger companies for this, but I truly believe that there needs to be more accountability for websites. I understand that you can't control everything that happens on your website, but when a job ad has been up for 30 days and it's clearly fraudulent and other people can still apply for it, maybe Monster and Indeed and LinkedIn and all those different companies should be held liable for all those people that lose their access to those accounts, whether or not they've been hacked or their social security number. So yeah.
So you mentioned the sock puppets, the 8 accounts that you created to basically create, I guess, fake job profiles on these websites. Like, are you saying that we need to socially engineer or, basically do recon and OSINT on the jobs that we're applying for? It's not just as simple as just, applying for jobs at this point. Is that what the job search looks like in 2022?
I mean, I think so personally. And if you think about it too, like when I was like applying for an example, I applied for a governmental job, right? I had a connection with somebody that works there. So I sent her my resume. She looked over it and said, based off of this is what I think you should change. And here's some examples of people that applied for the same job. So, I mean, if you think about it, yeah, I mean, it happens even if it's not like online, we're constantly doing it. So yeah, I think that for sure, that's something that we need to be doing.
Okay. And then so as far as you being a researcher, what was your experience like, I guess just not just being a woman that's doing research in this, but also being a Black woman. What was that like for you? Would you recommend that, people who are interested in asking the whys, go in and do, research and get a PhD and go through the process?
It might be a little too much of a fresh question based off of my I always hear that you're never supposed to ask somebody that's in a PhD program whether or not they recommend it. But I'm laughing because it was a struggle. But I will say it's not because I wasn't smart enough. Women in general aren't smart enough. If anything, I think that we're more keen and aware of the socially engineered tactics that people are presenting, because we have to pay attention to social norms even more than I would say like our white male counterparts. And my husband is a white male, so I mean he agrees with me, especially after seeing my experience. It's not it should never be where a Black woman like me has to prove herself 2 or 3 times more than my white counterpart. And I feel like currently in this field, that is something that I'm up against. Having to justify myself when I have the credentials is like completely insane to me. Like I shouldn't have to explain, like, because I do a lot of or especially more recently I've done a lot of pen testing. I shouldn't have to explain how and that's not me being arrogant, it's me being confident in my ability to do it, and also watching other people do it like me, and you not asking them questions about the things that they weren't able to find that I was able to find. So it's just so I guess there is a need for more of us in this space, but it's not going to be easy. Nothing is easy. The last month of my dissertation, I just kept coming back to Ruby Bridges, and how like there's a quote that she says like the path you have to like start your own path, right? Sometimes it's just you having to go, and it's so that other people behind you can have an easier time in loose quotations, but also so that you can further the field, so offenders aren't continuing to get away with stuff. Because, you know, I could sit here all day and just be like, woe is me, but if I do that, then I'm not helping somebody else that is probably going to be victimized online, because we see that crime, the dark figure of crime, in my opinion, is crime's decreasing the physical world because it's increasing online. But so I do encourage research. I think that it's great. I love answering the whys. That's one thing I think I'm going to miss in teaching, because I have taught. I started teaching at UTC. It was part of my assistantship. So I do enjoy teaching. I enjoy students, especially students that are like, why? But so I think that there's a need for that, but it is going to be a challenge, and I'm not going to lie about that challenge.
So when you look around in your department, and not just, I guess, at your school specifically, but like, you know, in the, you know, the PhD folks that you've associated with, do you see a lot of Black women or women, I guess, period, in that space? Or is it, even in the research space, it's still like, you know, I think we see like the 24% women, you know, 75% men type of demographics. Is that what it looks like in the research space as well?
Yeah, it really does. And I think it makes it harder too, because when you don't, let me back up. When I first started looking at PhD programs to apply for, I called around and I was like, hey, can I come visit, you know, your department? So I visited every place I applied for. One of the places I applied for, she had only seen, like, heard my voice, and we communicated like online, but she'd never seen a picture of me. Okay.
Did you see me like immediately get upset because like I know where this is going? I'm sorry, go ahead.
And so this is a top research program. It's not the one that I graduated from, but a top, like, one that people were, I think, disappointed I didn't go to. But my husband at the time, he's my fiance, we walk in and I was like, oh, I'm here, you know, for the interview and, you know, to get a view of the campus. She looked up at me and she said, oh no, I'm waiting for Tessa. It's like, I am Tessa. And then it was as the day went on, it just got worse and worse. At the end of the day, we had a meeting with the only other faculty member that was of color. And he was, sorry, I'm trying to avoid getting it away where it was, but this person said to address the elephant in the room, and then went on for 45 minutes about color at the university.
Wow.
And then when I met, let me back up a little bit, for lunch, when I took a break for lunch, the only other graduate student that they had was a woman of color, and she nicely encouraged me to go elsewhere.
Which is crazy. But, you know, honestly, I feel like your experience, both in terms of, you know, the social and gender imbalance and racial imbalance that we're hearing about, is the same in the workforce. And I think also the feeling that you have to work, you know, 2 or 3 times harder than everybody else just to be able to prove yourself. You know, especially when you're operating in a technical space. So, you know, I don't think that, you know, not to discourage you, but I don't think it's going to get any better, you know, once you're on the other side of the, you know, the education space, unfortunately, because I think that that's just something that, you know, goes to speak to the experience of women, especially, you know, women of color that are operating in this space. So I'm sorry that you know, that happened to you. What has your experience been like as far as the research itself? Like, you know, have you found that, you know, it's rewarding to you? Like, any regrets? Like, if you had it all to do over again, would you, you know, go back and do your PhD program, or would you do anything different?
No, I don't have many regrets about like what I've chosen to study. I love it. And I mean, I think it's just because I have like a really like a big pull towards like helping victims. And there is something fun about like screwing with offenders a little bit, if you follow what I'm saying. Like I love the like my mom unfortunately was hacked and the whole ransomware thing about 9 months ago, and so like I've had to help her with that. But I will say that it was a horrible experience, obviously, for her and for me, like trying to help her navigate all that. But it was fun to be able to sit there with her and not get back, but at least waste their time from trying to like
Attack other
victimize other
people.
people. And I think it was a bonding experience too, because every so often she'll like send me like videos or whatever that she finds online of people doing similar what we did to them. She's like, oh, look how they did the same thing. And so but no, I would not change my research path. If anything, I probably would have honed in more on the victim aspect more than I do the offender, but I understand, and I'm glad for my offender like focus with my dissertation, because ultimately if we're not going after how offenders operate, we can teach people and be reactive all the time, but let's stop being so reactive when there's things that we can change to be proactive and stop some of this victimization. And again, I'm right back at section 230. I think if you start making people be more responsible, take guardianship, then we'll see a change. But then again, that also requires big tech, which big tech, they're more interested, in my opinion and in my experience, selling you ransomware protection versus stopping it from it
Getting at
beginning.
the root of why it happens in the first place.
Yeah, and you knew this was a problem 6 months ago, that sort of thing. So
Yeah. So what do you think that it looks like if we get more women in this space, we get more people of color, we get more diversity in this space? I tell people all the time that I think it's very important that we attack this problem of diversity in the cyberspace from a much younger level, so that we have time to get people to go and do PhD programs, right? So that we're not, at however, whatever age we decide that we want to kind of transition into cybersecurity, attempting to do a PhD program and, pushing, of course, our impact further out. What do you think that it looks like if we get the diversity into the space? What are some of the things that you'd like for us to see that you think that we can improve as far as online safety, just I guess from the employment standpoint, and then also from like just the not becoming victims ourselves?
I think I mean, obviously there's a lot of benefits. One of them is kids, and I feel old saying this, like kids nowadays, but I mean, kids nowadays are typically, they're more up to date with like, what's popular, what's not, that sort of thing. And so by targeting the younger demographics, I think that we'd be able to pick up on the new trends quicker, right? So like when COVID hit, Nick said, there was an increase on like sextortion, right, with these kids, but most of the sextortion isn't coming from, or from my understanding of it, isn't coming from like kids extorting other kids, which that was a problem. But you have like, the Nigerian scammers who, they're not going to be penalized for what they're doing really much in their country, because sometimes when a country's corrupt, you get into like, the whole like, if your country's corrupt, are they going to come after you for being corrupt? The ideology type stuff, right? But you have these Nigerian scammers who are, picking up on this. Well, if we had included kids on the conversation, or in the conversation of, hey, what are you seeing that's happening that's drastically changed? I bet that the numbers of kids that were sextorted would have dropped online if we were able to like have that kind of conversation. But we have to be willing to have conversations with those younger than us, humble ourselves and say, maybe we don't know everything. Maybe we are 10 years behind in research. And I think it's a big problem in research is that the peer reviewed process, I get it. Like it needs to be there so that you make sure that things are just not being published that are just absolutely crazy, right? At the same time, it is ridiculous for a researcher to research something for a year and then for it to sit online for 2 to 3 years. By that time, the research that you have published is probably out of date, especially when it comes to cyber like attacks and characteristics and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think go ahead.
Does that devalue the research, right? Because, obviously it takes you some time. So let's say it takes you a year to do your research, right? And then you publish it, right? And then it's got a shelf life of about a year, right? Like, are we talking about like a continual feedback loop to update the research, or, like what would you advise, right? Because we think about that in terms of technology as well, right? We develop technology, it only works for about, a year or so, and then it becomes obsolete. We've got to get new technology. So, what would you recommend for that? Like, how do we address, the having information that's current and relevant?
I think that like you said, the shelf life, it needs to be cut in half. If you can't read the research, I think that somebody like within that journal should say, hey, we're inundated, send it somewhere else. There needs to be more of a open access, right? Where you're not having to pay $50+ to read an article. So yeah, I think that the gate, and back to, why is it sitting on a shelf life, that sort of thing. We also have to remember who's gatekeeping these journals. Like who are the people that are approving it? And I've always been taught that when you submit a journal, it's like blind review. Sometimes I wonder if it is, and I'm not like trying to like dog academics at all. Okay. Like some of my favorite people are academics, like, and the people I look up to, like, but we need to rethink and disperse the people that are gatekeeping articles and journal entries and everything. So I think, yeah, there's.
So if you face a lot of some of the same obstacles that you did, like for example, when visiting colleges in that, publishing of research, right? Then that means that we're going to not see as many as much diversity in the published article space as we, could, just because people are saying like, hey, this is not good enough, or this is not, it doesn't meet the standards, or what does that look like?
Yeah, so I've seen it all from it's not based enough in theory, and it's like, I mean, I don't know how else I could say this, and like I'd have to bring out like Spanish to say, this what I'm saying in a different, like, I don't know how it can't be based enough in theory, all the way down to it's not technical enough. And ultimately, and I've always said this, yes, offenders have to be somewhat technologically like familiar.
Savvy.
Yeah, in order to like complete their attacks, right? But tech is not changing so quickly that tech doesn't change so quickly that it's like the tech that's doing it, right? Ultimately, in order to conduct an attack, an offender has to somewhat socially engineer, right? It comes down to the person, just like, people say like a gun can't shoot itself. A computer, unless you have programmed it to conduct X amount of attacks on this person, that person, a computer is not just going to go like conduct the attacks itself, right? So that's something that I think that we need to think about.
All right. So next question. Now, word on the street is that you are speaking at DEF CON.
Yes.
At the Girls Hack Village. So without giving us too many spoilers, what are you going to be talking with us about?
So I'm going to merge both the victim aspect and also the offender. I was just going to get into like the employment study that I conducted. However, after completing my dissertation, I feel like there's some major aspects, even from like the offenders that are victimized, that should be included in there, just to show that like it doesn't, I mean, like it doesn't matter how savvy you are with tech. I'm just as like easily liable to fall victim to an attack as anyone else. I just have to make sure to pay attention to those things. So pointing out the risk online with our just day-to-day interactions. In addition to that, how we can combat that. So, yeah.
Cool. That sounds like an amazing thing. So for people who will be interested in getting PhD programs, what would you recommend that they do to kind of like go into that space, just based off of, like if you could tell your younger self, what advice would you give to better prepare yourself for this process? I know that it's been, as you said, very difficult at times and like almost unbearable, but how can you, what advice can you give to people who will be interested in doing a PhD at this point?
So I definitely think you should visit. Visiting really did, it helped me avoid probably a worse the worst possible outcome for myself. So visit the schools that you're interested in. Also see who's within those departments that you would want to work like underneath, because that's the person that you're going to be spending a lot of time with. So if you don't like what they're researching, you're probably not going to change them into a cyber criminologist. So there's that. And then also speaking to those that have been like through those departments, don't be afraid to reach out. If you're like, oh, this person, on LinkedIn, it says that they graduated from this program, because oftentimes those people are going to be more willing to be honest with you about their experience. Don't be afraid to ask questions to people that do not go to like let's say once you get in, right? Don't be afraid to make connections with people outside of your university. I know that oftentimes Research One universities can be very elitist about, oh, we keep ours and we keep everything in house and everything, but I'll tell you, Dr. Ray Gay from Temple has been.
Shout out to Dr. Ray Gay.
Yes, she has been incredible. There is no reason for her to want to invest in me as a person, but if it wasn't for her and her guidance and her encouragement, I wouldn't be where I am today. And so be willing to, if you don't get into,
you're not gonna make me cry. Sorry, go ahead.
If you be willing to, if you don't get into your favorite place with the person you want to study underneath, open to reaching out to that person still. And because more than likely, I mean she meets with me weekly and there is no reason for that. So other than she's a great person. So there are, and so that's, I want to come back to, there are really good people in this field. There are people that want to see you succeed. There are people that are rooting for you. Don't be so trapped into a negative situation or the way that things used to be. Because I know that like when I went through GSU, they said, well, this is what I experienced, but I went through the PhD program. Well, that doesn't mean that everybody has to experience that, right? You can start a new path. You can have, I mean, the world's your oyster. And I know that you hear that and people say that, growing up, but that's true. And there are people that want to see the field and at an individual level, like you succeed, but don't be afraid of reaching out and asking for help. So yeah.
Cool. Oh, you're not gonna make me cry today. That's dope. So what does it look like on the other side of having your PhD? What is your next step? And then my next question is going to be, what is your world domination plan? But I want to know, what is your next step now that you are officially Dr. Cole? What's next for you?
So the way that and this is like a new thing, apparently, I wrote my dissertation in like the 3-journal article type. So I'm editing that to like published in 3 different journals. I'm also working on another journal entry or article that like should have been done, but I had to prioritize to get out with the PhD. And Dr. Rege has been helping me with that one. But right now, currently, I'm interning with HSI, Homeland Security Investigations, here in Atlanta, and I'm absolutely loving it. I would love, yeah, I'd love to work in government. Ever since I was little, I know this is really weird, but like I was like 5 and I was like, I want to be a federal agent. I don't know where it came from, but I thought I was going to be an attorney federal agent, that type of thing, but we're making it, right? And honestly, I love it more than, and again, no knocking at my husband, but based off of the stuff he does, I like it a lot more than I think I would have liked being an attorney. But so I'm like in the process of seeing where I will end up federally wise. But in the meantime, they let me come in and intern, and I love it. So I'm always like careful. I'm not sure what I can/cannot say, so I always like I'm on the side of, yeah, I intern. But so that, and I would like to mentor, like in the next, I'm trying to give myself some like breathing room. Like I want to enjoy this internship, and I want to like take my time, and not like take my time forever, but like take my time a little bit, editing these journal articles and such, and just breathe, because for the past 4 years, I haven't really been able to breathe. I have lost 3 siblings during my PhD experience. And one was like, because like I said, I was adopted. One was 6 months older than me. His name is Skylar, and my daughter is actually named after him. But that was maybe 2 months into my first semester of my PhD. And so I would like to breathe from that, enjoy time with my daughter that I feel like I had to forfeit to finish the degree. Because I got pregnant during the first 2 weeks where they say this is going to be a 2-week lockdown with COVID, right? So my husband and I, we have had just a wonderful time in higher ed during this COVID, but she has been the light of my life, the light of our lives. And so I want to have a healthy work-life balance. And I'm not saying that all professors don't, but I think that sometimes it can get gray, because you're grading at home, right? And I think that's part of the reason why I'm attracted to like a government job. And I know that sometimes you have to work over 40 hours and, but you have to leave certain things at the office. There's things that I can't take back home as an intern, right? And so I think I like that balance. So the foreseeable future for right now is enjoy where I'm at. And for the longest time of my life, I've not enjoyed where I'm at. I'm always like, when I was going through my undergrad degree, I was like, okay, so after undergrad, I've got to get into a master's, and it has to be X program, and it has to, I have to do this. And then I'm in my master's, and I should be celebrating my passing of my thesis, and instead I'm like, I have to get into Georgia State, and Dallas has to get into Georgia State, and we have to, and instead it's like, no, I'm going to enjoy this. So I have a party set up for myself in like a month, but it's like, just enjoy where you're at, because I'm afraid of getting to the end of my life and being like, I accomplished all these things, but for what? And I don't want it to be for what. I want it to be for, I accomplished these things. These people were helped. This is how I encouraged other people. And if I didn't have this PhD and I didn't have anything, at the end of the day, I want to be known as a good person who treated people nicely. And that is one thing from my experience the past few years that is most important to me.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. And again, you're not about to make me cry today, ma'am. So, so world domination plan. I know you mentioned the federal government. Like, what is like, hey, I have achieved all that, besides being a good person, what is the end goal for you? Like, what is when you're saying shoot for the stars, what are the stars for you?
I would love to work with them on cyber crimes. Like whether, and I want it to, I don't want to get stuck and pigeonholed. And I know sometimes that can happen, like within the federal government where it's like, oh, you're only working on, and it's not only working on, but like when you get into like a group, it's like child exploitation and that only, And so I think that's great. And I want to help there, but I don't want to be seen as just like that only, especially with how technology just like constantly like turns. I would like to, pursue investigations where you don't know where it's going to take you. So like offenders who are not just operating off of like financial incentives when they deploy like a sextortion scam, but also like the ideology behind it, right? Because I think if you can pair the two together, money, ideology, that you'll be able to help more victims. And it, to me, and this is why I like online fraud. When you have an online fraud case, right? It's not just like online fraud. Online fraud, the reason why so many offenders are involved in it is because like in order to get your drug money, you also have to have online fraud to get the money laundered, right? In order to get the, so it's like everything is interconnected. Oh, okay. So you're making money, with child abuse images. Well, how do you get that? You got to have online fraud. I mean, you don't have to, but like a wise, I'm not trying to teach criminality here, but like research says that that's, how it sort of works, right? And so I would love to do something with the federal government involving online fraud because of the different ways and branches that so many of the cases go. So
that sounds like a dope plan. All right, so I'm going to open it up for questions for Dr. Cole, if anybody has anything. Let's see. I allowed everybody to unmute, so hopefully if anybody has any questions, they can be able to ask them. So certifications. So you say you do some pen testing, you've been doing your work and research, you've been in school for, it sounds like a very, very long time. Do you feel like you're going to need to get any certifications to do what's next for you?
I'm afraid I am. And that's what frustrates me is, and I understand it though, because I know there are some cyber criminologists that like, they just talk in theory and they don't know how to do anything. But when I'm looking at the price tag of things, I was talking to my husband the other day, I'm like, dadgummit, did I not already pay my dues? Like, but I'm thinking I probably am, but I was told to wait a little bit because somebody might be paying for it. Because like I have a brother in the military. He's a Marine, and so he didn't have to pay for any of his certifications because the military put him through it. So I don't think I will have a problem passing any of them because I know what I'm doing, but I do think probably I'll end up having to get a few certifications. So yeah.
I understand. We've actually got a couple of partnerships in Black Girls Hack that you can get some certifications. So if any of them are through INE, we have discounts on both the EC Council and CompTIA as well. So like if I can help in any way, please feel free to reach out. Like you said, use your network. Don't be afraid to, reach out and talk to people, because they may be able to help you, take over the world. Any other questions? Any thoughts? Dr. Reggae, you want to say anything?
Yeah, Tessa, I just want to say that, girl, I'm so proud of you. I am so proud of you. And I know what you've gone through. I know, right? And you mentioned I didn't have to help you or I didn't have to talk to you, but you know what? I did, because I wish when I was a graduate student, somebody did that for me. And I know how important it is to just have someone that gets it, that understands it. And I may be 10 years ahead sort of in my career than where you are, but I still wish I had someone to talk to, right? And it's a two-way street, Tessa. I may have helped you, but you have no idea how you've helped me. So, and it gives me great pride and joy to know that in some way, shape, or form, I get to contribute, to creating that next generation superstars, right? That's what you are. Don't you ever forget that. And don't let anyone ever take that away from you, because you've earned it and you deserve it. So congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm not gonna make me cry today. All right. Any questions for Dr. Cole? If not, then I will give you the rest of your Sunday back. Dr. Cole, Tessa, thank you so much for coming to hang out with us today. We also featured you on Friday. So if you guys are interested in Dr. Cole's bio, you can check it out on all of our social media. And she will also be live and in effect at Girls Hack Village at DEF CON in August. So you'll have to come and check her out. She'll be talking about her research and some of the takeaways that folks can bring back from that, So, where's your journal article with your husband?
It is not published yet. It's not out yet, but it's under review in victimology and victim justice. So
okay, and so you'll drop it with us. You'll send me the link to it so I can share with the squad once you're done.
And I will say I also have my master's thesis. I published it in victims and offenders, and I can send that to you too.
That would be dope, and I will share it with the squad so they can get some light reading.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming out and hanging out with us today. And everybody enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.
Thank you.